In today's world, oil plays a big role. Countries that have oil reserves manage to become incredibly rich in a period of short time. Today, these countries provide a high standard of living to their residents. In this video, we will look at 5 rich countries that lives above average through the sale of oil. Let's start with Saudi Arabia, a relatively close country occupying 80% of the Arabian Peninsula. Before the discovery and development of oil fields by American companies in the late 1930s, the local economy was extremely poor. Most of the population led a nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyle, and the main income came from raising and selling livestock and from religious tourism. Saudi Arabia ranked second in the world in oil reserves after Venezuela, 266 billion barrels. Today, more than 90% of Saudi Arabia's exports are oil products. They produce 10 million barrels of oil per day. The huge reserves of easy available raw materials with a relatively small population made Saudi Arabia very rich. GDP per capita adjusted for purchasing power parity, it ranks 14th in the world, ahead of the largest economies such as Australia, Canada and Japan. Saudi Arabia has been trying for decades to become a leader in the Middle East, as there are 2 shrines revered by Muslims on its territory, and the state language of the kingdom is the language of Islam, in which Holy Koran is written and prayers are read. In 4th place, a country not everybody knows about and is among the 7 richest countries in the world in terms of per capita income. Kuwait is one of the most controversial countries in the world. They profess Islam, but women have the same rights as men. There is a huge amount of oil which makes the country one of the richest in the world. Oil in Kuwait is cheaper than water. Kuwait got independence in 1961. Before that, it was under the protectorate of Great Britain. However, relations with neighbors Iraq and Saudi Arabia were not easy. The hardest was with Iraq, which headed for the annexation of the state and considered Kuwait as part of its country. On one hand, the state is not having a democratic regime. On the other hand, people have very high standard of living. Regarding women's rights, this is one of the most progressive Muslim countries in this matter. The level of education of residents exceeds 90%. What can I say? If the citizens of the country who want to study abroad, the government pays for everything from flying to studying. The country's currency is the most valuable in the world, and there is 1 servant or maid per local. Huge oil reserves allow them to live and not to deny anything. There are no taxes in the country. There are huge benefits for children and for divorced women. In general, the rules of life in Kuwait are simple. Do not use alcohol and drugs that are prohibited there, and do not criticize the authorities. Here is such a rich country with a high standard of living of citizens who live in abundance but are forced to remain silent. Another Gulf country which over the course of several decades has turned from an oasis into one of the most developed countries with a high standard of living is United Arab Emirates. 9 million people live in the country, of which only 2 million are citizens of the country. The rest are foreigners who came here as workers. The UAE is a Muslim country with its own traditions and culture. This applies to clothing and behavior and in general lifestyle. No matter how many years you have lived there, no matter how much energy and money you have spent there, no one will grant a citizenship and all related privileges. Even after buying an expensive real estate, it is impossible to become a citizen of the United Arab Emirates. When the Emirates authorities found oil 60 years ago, they wanted to get rid of the oil needle as quickly as possible and built the incredible city of Dubai, which attracts tourists more and more day by day. Last year, a tiny emirate, according to the recent data, was visited by 20 million people, the same as huge Russia with a large number of attractions. Now, the share of oil in the country's GDP is 20%, which is lower than in Saudi Arabia, Angola, Nigeria, Kuwait and Qatar, which is surprising for a country located in the desert. The country has a very high quality roads, no corruption, no unemployment and very high salaries for residents and for foreigners with higher education. Forget about the salary when the basic pension for citizens is almost $3,000 per month. Undoubtedly, the leading positions in the country are occupied by citizens. At birth, the state opens an account for each child, and by the age of majority, it has about $100,000 on it. A young family receives from the government a plot of land and about $20,000 for a wedding. Here is life in a country rich from oil. The next country is Brunei. Brunei is probably the least known country on our list. It is one of the 5 richest countries in the world and is located on the island of Kalimantan or Borneo near Malaysia. At first glance, Brunei live in paradise. Excellent climate all year, only summer. The country is rich in resources. The population is small. People unusually for Asia are very few. The head of the country is Sultan Hassanal, who at the same time is the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Minister of Defense and Minister of Foreign Affairs. He has the largest collection of cars, more than 7,000. His fortune is estimated at $20 billion, and the Sultan does everything for his inhabitants so that they live in prosperity. Healthcare in Brunei is almost free for citizens. If some treatment is not available domestically, then patients are sent to treatment by public expense to other countries, for example to Malaysia or Singapore. Brunei provides its citizens with free education at all levels, from kindergarten to university. Moreover, if an applicant enters a foreign university, the state pays for his studies abroad. Brunei citizens are exempt from income tax. Moreover, they receive considerable subsidies from the state. The state pays the traditional annual pilgrimage to Mecca, Hajj. The well-being of the Sultanate is based almost exclusively on extraction of oil and natural gas. And finally, the first place, the richest country in the world for the past 3 years, the country where the Football World Cup will be held in 2022. Qatar, a small country in the Persian Gulf, which ranks 3rd in terms of gas reserves after Russia and Iran, whose exports brings Qatar large part of its income. The government of Qatar directs income from oil and gas exports to the development of the country and the well-being of its residents. The minimum wage in the country starts from $500, mainly for maids, janitors and other unskilled workers from India, Pakistan, Egypt and other Asian countries. Companies that hire foreigners usually pay for everything: insurance, transportation, housing and food. Average salaries start from $2,000, where Europeans and foreigners with higher education work, but the highest salaries are received by the Qatari themselves or specialists in the oil industry, from $5,000 to $10,000. But most Qatari simply does not work, because this makes no sense. They already receive various grants and social support from the government. In 2017, Saudi Arabia and the UAE declared an economic blockade for Qatar, as they were against the country's foreign policy. But as soon as the blockade was declared, Iran and Turkey rushed to the aid of Qatar, proposing to create new trading routes and supply a variety of consumer goods through ships and aircrafts. Now the inhabitants of the country live in luxury in various cities of the country where the matches of the World Cup will be held. There is a construction boom. That is all, fellas. Do not forget to watch other videos on our channel. like top 10 best countries to live, tallest skyscrapers, and most powerful countries in the world. Subscribe and click the notification bell on to not miss our new interesting videos. Goodbye.